Welcome to the Creative Tools Podcast. My name is Ashay, and I'm immensely passionate about using technology for creativity. On this podcast, I talk to various creators about what tools and technology they use to be creative. My guest today is Kevin Lohman. Kevin is a nature photographer living in Santa Cruz, California. He makes wildlife and landscape images with Nikon and Sony mirrorless cameras and edits them on a Mac computer using Adobe Lightroom. His educational background in marine science heavily influences his photography, and his career at a technology company has made him comfortable managing digital images. Kevin is a member of the North American Nature Photography Association and has had images recognized in various photo contests. Hi, Kevin. Thanks a lot for visiting my podcast.
Hey, Ashay, thank you so much for inviting me.
So let's dive right in. My first question is what do you create?
I am a nature photographer and I make images of wildlife and landscapes, mostly wildlife. And then the landscapes are opportunistic. If I'm out and something looks great, I'll create a landscape image of that. And then from there, I distribute my images in different ways, either via social media or I print them and sell them as well on paper and metal. And then I also have like greeting cards and puzzles. So these are just ways of getting them out there. And then I enter various contests as well. So just to kind of keep my visibility up there with anything I'm creating.
Great. Thanks a lot for the introduction. So the way that I'm going to structure this podcast is in three sections. So the first one is pre-creation. So before you start making your creations, what happens and what tools and technology you use for that. Then the actual creation part, and then the post creation, which is the release, distribution, and marketing of your creation. So let's first talk about the pre-creation part. And for that, I want to specifically understand, but you can also talk a lot more than what I'm asking. I want to understand, how do you record and how do you retrieve your inspirations?
Sure. Well, as a photographer, the actual recording and retrieving is through a digital camera system. I use mirrorless cameras. I go out in the field and find a scenario that looks great, a subject that I might have to wait hours for something interesting to happen. And then I'll create the image from that using my camera. And then I take that back home and I'll import that into my computer using Adobe Lightroom. And I use a Apple Mac Pro, MacBook Pro for my computer. And then I have a couple of displays set up so I can work on different things, different elements of the images as I'm editing them. So it's really recorded with the digital camera and then bring it onto my computer so I can go ahead and edit those images and share them in the various ways that I do.
So has it ever happened with you that you did not have your camera with you, and then you went out and then you found something interesting, and then you decided you are going to come back to it later with your camera?
Yes, I'll do that frequently. Like I may go on a scouting mission.
Mm-hmm.
And so I will. So just a couple of days ago, I had heard that there was a great horned owl nearby. So I hopped on my electric bike and grabbed my binoculars and headed out to scout out, see if I could find the owl, which I did. And it was earlier in the day, so the light wasn't where I wanted it. And then I would go about the rest of my day, headed home. And when the light got a little bit better later in the day, then I grabbed my camera and headed back out to the location so I could spend more time with the owl. I grab my tripod in this case because owls tend to sit in a single perch for a long time. So I use a tripod in that instance, and then I was able to start recording that. And I did a combination of still images as well as some video.
So this is an example where the um, the inspiration of capturing a moment and in the activity of actually capturing the moment were very close to each other. But have there been scenarios where you wanted something, you wanted to capture something, and then it maybe months and years went by, and then you went back and then captured uh, that scene? Has that happened?
Yeah, and generally the way that happens is I've done a lot of traveling up and down the coast in California, and I started doing wildlife photography about 5 years ago. So I visited a number of places prior to that. So those could be considered pre-scouting missions. So
Hmm.
I've been to various locations. I have an idea of what I might be able to find there. And then after I started doing wildlife photography, I would go back and visit those places, but now with a camera. And so it could be many years since I had been there previously. And now I'm looking at it with a slightly different eye, but I had an idea of what it was that I was getting myself into when I went to those places.
So for these pre-scouting missions, where did you record what you wanted to visit in future? Like, was it
So
just a notebook or something else?
yeah, it was mostly I would maybe take images with my iPhone.
Hmm.
So I would have some visual recording. Then I could go back and search by location and find images from that location or from the time of year
Hmm.
and see what it was that I might have made an image of before. But just with my iPhone is the way I would record it, or I would take notes on my phone in notes
Hmm.
applications so
Hmm.
that I could go back to it later. I use that a lot too when I'm chatting with somebody who might have a tip
Hmm.
on some place that I want to visit.
Hmm.
So, for example, I was speaking with a well-known photographer recently, and I said, "Hey, I'm going to be heading up on a trip to Oregon and Washington for a couple of weeks. Do you have any suggestions?" And so he started rattling off a few places, and I jotted them all down in my notes application on my phone. So then I could go back and figure out, okay, do a little more research into those locations, determine what the best time of day might be to visit there, where there are some more specific locations I want to go to. So that would be a situation where it's not instant. I'm planning
Hmm.
ahead for some place I'm going to go to.
Hmm.
That's similar, like if I'm planning a big trip someplace. Like last year, I went to Africa, and I'd never been there before. But over the years, many years prior, I've watched a lot of wildlife videos, and in preparation for going, I read through some books, looked online to get an idea of what could I expect. I talked with other photographers that are going to those locations. I've asked them, what equipment did you have? What lenses did you find to be most useful? How do you manage backups while you're on the road to keep track of your data and minimize the risk of losing, those once in a lifetime shots that
Hmm.
you're going to create?
Hmm.
So those are the types of things I would go into ahead of time before a trip to a place that I've never been.
And when you mentioned about notes application, so you make some notes in the notes app. Uh, how do you make sure that you find the right note when you need it? Do you tag it, or do you do some kind of search mechanism? How do you do it?
Yeah, I have a uh, different folders. I would call locations, and then I would just put okay, these are tips on locations, and I
Hmm.
would put those in there. I'd also keep track of names of people. If I run into somebody at a location, then I have a folder called names. And then I'll put down the names of people that I've met at different places so that if I go back there and I see them again, I can sound like I'm amazing and I remember their names.
Okay, great. Um, so I mean, the reason I'm asking these questions is like I'm a filmmaker, and when because I make films, I also watch a lot of films to understand the rhythm of the visual storytelling. Um, but and then I can see something really, really amazing in front of my eyes, and I would usually record that somehow. So the way for me to record is I have created like a text group with just me as a member in it, and then I just text it to that group that I watched this today. However, what happens with me is if I am making a film, let's say, because I'm not making films all the time. Like if I make a film, let's say 2 years later, I need a good way or good mechanism to access the inspiration that I had recorded 2 years ago. And that kind of becomes a challenge because I have to go through my whole list of notes and data and pictures and whatnot to just see if whatever I'm making, is there anything that I have recorded that may influence or inspire me to do something that I'm creating right now. So that becomes a challenge because my um, time of creation and the time of inspiration hitting are separated by years. So it becomes extremely challenging to find my own recorded inspiration 2 years ago. Um, okay, great. So this was the inspiration part. I really loved the stuff that you talked about, where you said um, the inspiration can come to you by even talking to someone, and then uh, getting tips on locations and getting tips on where to go in those locations. That's kind of collaboration aspect to it is something that I don't necessarily experience all the time, because as a filmmaker I watch a lot of content, but that's a very solitary exercise. Like i I watch on Netflix, I watch on Prime Video. But anyway, great. So let's talk about the creation part, where you actually create your images. So so I will tell you what I experience while creating, and then you tell me if you experience something similar or if it is completely different. That's fine. I would love to know. So um, there are two things that I experience when I'm creating something. One is I want to build a prototype of what I'm creating very, very fast. And then while I'm building a prototype of what I'm creating, the actual creation gets built in my head first. And then the next step is whatever I have created in front of me. Uh, the next step is basically uncovering or removing all the stuff so that I can reach the creation in front of my eyes, which is identical to what I have in my head. So those are the two steps that I go through. I mean, especially for films, the film is, I see the film first in my head, and then I shoot with video, audio, and then I have this entire mess of like the huge digital files, and now I have to uncover my film that I'm seeing in my head through that.
Right. You're basically storyboarding at some level how you want to lay out the film to tell a particular story.
Right.
Um, the way I approach that is I base mine around a subject.
Hmm.
You know, whether it's a great horned owl or an osprey or an acorn woodpecker or whatever it is. Because I don't know what images I'm going to be able to create, especially if it's in a new location or a new setting, I'd approach it with, first of all, finding the subject.
Hmm.
That's the most important.
Hmm.
Once I found the subject, then I might do a couple of what somebody else has coined the term, proof shots.
Hmm.
So I'll take a couple of images of it just to prove that I saw it.
Hmm.
And it may be something I can refer to later if I'm needing a little more detail or information about that particular subject. Then I say, okay, now I've got a proof shot, so I can show, yes, I did in fact see that. Then I go to the next step of saying, okay, well, how can I make this a better image to document what I've seen so it has a higher quality, but still maybe not a piece of art. So I'll say I start with, how do I find the right angle? Where's the light coming from? I might make a few images at one angle. I look at them on the back of the camera and I say, yeah, that's great. That's what I want more of. Or no, not getting it. So I'll try to move around to a different angle. All the time being sensitive that you don't want to disturb or upset the subject or cause it to behave in a way that is not natural. Because at the end of the day, the subject is the most important thing. Me getting a picture of it is secondary to the subject. So if I can get myself in a new position and be able to make an image that is better quality, better light, maybe has more emotion to it, then that's what I'm going to aim for. But if it looks like in order to get in that position, I'm going to scare off the bird and it's going to fly away, or you're going to impact it because it's sitting on a nest, and you don't want it to leave the nest and abandon it, and then that would impact the hatchlings that are in that nest. So if I can get into a new position and not impact that, then I can start creating an image that now has a potential to become something that I could then turn into a piece of art that others will want to look at and say, wow, that's incredible. I've never seen that before, and enjoy it in a very pleasing way, as opposed to just a documentary image, which says, oh, that's cool. I'd never seen that subject before, but you want to turn it from, oh, that's cool, into, wow, that's amazing. So those are the things that kind of step to it first. Find it and just get a proof shot, then document it so you have something a little bit more to the image, and find the better light so that you can create that image to end up with a nice artistic piece.
So I have a couple of questions here. So one is, when you take the proof shots, and then the process begins where now you are in a position that you are not disturbing the subject, and then you go into an artistic adventure. So while doing all of this, what tools do you have on you? Is it only your camera or anything else?
Yeah, so there are several things that I have. Obviously, the camera is most important. And before I go out to a location, depending on what I anticipate being able to image, I either might have a long lens or an intermediate length lens or a shorter lens. If I wanted to do a more landscape wide angle shot, then I might take a wider angle lens. But most of what I do is really centered around a longer lens. And if I'm going to be hiking around and the light is relatively good or very good, then I will not take a tripod with me. If I know that I'm going to a subject that is going to be fairly stationary, owls tend to stay in the same spot, whether they're burrowing owls that are going to be on the ground most of the time, and near their hole in the ground, the burrow, or a great horned owl that's sitting up in a tree, then I might have my tripod with me. But if it's a bird that I know is going to be flying around a lot, then I usually won't bother with my tripod, and I'll hand hold my lenses. So, that's one of the first considerations I have is, it going to be hiking for a while? And is the subject more likely to be stationary or moving around? So if it's stationary, yes, I might have a tripod. But even then I might not. Then I'll have a camera strap that I'm comfortable with so that I can attach the camera and free up my hands occasionally when I need to, so that I can have it, hanging from my side, but comfortably so that I don't use the camera straps that go around the neck, because they put a lot of pressure on the back of the neck. So I have one that goes off of the shoulders, and I
Okay.
could even hang two cameras on it. So I could
Okay.
have one camera body on each strap, and it helps weigh things out. So I feel a little more even when I'm, hiking to wherever I'm going. Uh, I will often bring a small, lightweight pair of binoculars. So if I don't know exactly where something's going to be, or I want to get an idea of, hey, I see something there, is that a common bird that I already have a lot of images of, and it's not necessarily in a great location anyway? The binoculars will help me discern that from a distance, as opposed to having to hike up a certain path and then find out, oh, I really don't need another picture of a black phoebe. I'm looking for something more interesting. So binoculars are really helpful. I also usually wear a pair of tactical pants where I am able to put knee pads in the pockets in the knees of the pants, because I'm often kneeling or lying
Hmm.
down flat on the ground
Hmm.
while I'm making images. So having pants that I can kneel on without hurting my knees are really, really helpful. Um, I also carry a lens cleaning cloth, so that if I get dust on my lens, I have something I can just pull out of my pocket and get the dust off. So I'm able to keep, getting the best, clearest images I can. If the weather's not great, I may have a um, a cover that I can put over my lens and camera to keep the, you know heavy rain from getting into the equipment, or if it's really, really dusty, to keep the dust from getting into the lens element as well. So those are the types of things I'm thinking about. Usually wear comfortable shoes that also have some grip on them. So if I'm walking on something a little slippery or uneven, I am better able to maintain my stance. Although that didn't work for me one time. I had just gotten a new camera and I was out and walking around a tide pool area, and I took a step and my foot slipped out from me and I took a tumble and my camera went right into a saltwater puddle and
Oh my
broke the
goodness.
lens hood off my lens, and had to send everything back to Sony to have them work on it. So not an ideal way to start a shoot, but it happens, right? So it's just part of doing business.
So how do you keep track of all this? Like, do you have like a checklist before you go on a mission that I'm going to take all of this, or is it only based on your memory?
It's a handful. It's like a half dozen things, and I'm usually wearing my pants, so that's generally safe. I don't forget them. Uh, the camera strap is the first thing I look for to make sure I have that. So if I'm going on a bigger trip where I'm traveling, then I'm going to be potentially taking my computer, and then I got to go through a checklist, maybe a mental checklist or whatever. But I say, okay, if I have my computer, I need to have power. I need to have my card readers so that I can easily take the memory card out of the camera and import it onto the computer. I want backup drives so that I can back up the information. So it all depends on what I'm going on. And, for day trips where I'm just heading to a location that I've gone to dozens and dozens of times, I know all I need is my camera and my strap and the lens cleaning cloth, and then I have a little satchel that I carry around with me that is just like a little, not
Hmm.
quite a fanny pack, but something like that, where I already keep stuff in there, like spare
Hmm.
memory cards,
Right. Right.
batteries. So when I come back and I charge a battery, then I put and it's charged, it goes right back into the pack. So
Right.
I've got that ready to grab, but I want to have as minimal stuff as possible for two reasons. One is I don't want to carry everything with me because it gets very heavy.
Right.
The lenses themselves, can get really, really heavy. And, that equipment, you could easily be carrying around 10 to 15 pounds worth of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and I also don't want to leave a lot of stuff in the car if it's in a less populated area, so that if
Mm.
somebody breaks into the car,
Mm.
then I'm not losing as much
Mm.
equipment, if any.
Mm.
So, these are just some of the things that I try to think about depending on the location I'm going to.
And then I want to talk about how let's touch a little bit about the process between your proof shots and it becoming an artistic piece. So, um, and I will tell you a couple of my thoughts about it, and then you tell me if I'm thinking it right. So one of the things I really feel that one of the things that digital technology has afforded us is an ability to make a choice rather than a decision. So um, because you are taking digital pictures, you can go back to that picture and see what you may have missed or what you can add right then and there while you're taking the picture, which wouldn't have been possible if you are filming on a celluloid film. So to do that efficiently, like you mentioned, you take a couple of proof shots and then going back to your shots that you have taken to see whether you have missed something, and then uh, using that as an inspiration for the next shots. Do you only use the screen of the camera that you have, or you have some other equipment with you?
Yeah, when I'm out in the field, I primarily use the screen on the camera or
Hmm.
the eyepiece. With the mirrorless cameras now, uh, you can just look through the eyepiece and you have a nice representation of that image you just took, as
Hmm.
opposed to looking on the back of the camera.
Oh, okay.
So I used to carry around a magnifying attachment piece that it's a hood from a company called Hoodman, and that would go over the back 3.5-inch LCD screen on the
Hmm.
back of the camera, and then I look through the eyepiece, so that would cover the
Hmm.
light that would come from the side, so I can get a better view of it. But with the mirrorless cameras, I don't need to do that. I can just look right into the
Hmm.
eyepiece, and it's already shielded from the outside light, and I can get a much better look at it. So I don't have to put the camera down and to see what I'm doing. I could actually still be watching the subject, then
Right.
quickly go into the review mode and see that. Now, so that's the way I do probably 95% of the time. But if I'm in a vehicle, whether it's a boat or somebody's driving and I'm not driving, what I will do sometimes is I will transfer the image from my camera to my phone,
Hmm.
and just over Bluetooth, and that gives me an opportunity to see a bigger image and to more easily zoom in on it and
Right.
kind of get a better preview of what I've taken. But that's generally after I've left the location. I'm
Hmm.
not usually doing that on location, because when I'm on location, my primary goal is to create the best images that are available to me while any action is happening.
Hmm.
If I'm sitting someplace for hours and hours and hours and there's nothing going to happen for a while, I might move it onto my phone and look at it. But I generally have a pretty good idea, because I've been doing this for a while, of whether it's good or not just from looking at it through the viewfinder on the camera.
And makes the what makes your proof shot sorry, the proof shot doesn't go into the artistic piece, but what I want to understand is like how do you find the value that you are going to add to your proof shot so that it becomes an artistic piece? Like what's your process for that?
Yeah. So with the cameras that I use, I shoot up to 20 frames per second. So I can very quickly create hundreds or thousands of images of whatever the subject is. And I don't necessarily look at every single image, certainly not at the time. I may review all of them later. But what I'm looking for is testing occasional images. So like, okay, I just tried some new settings, and then I'll review the image and see, is it sharp? Am I getting good light? Do I have some emotions that seem to be coming in from the subject?
Hmm.
Like if it's if it's a bird sitting there on a perch with its eyes closed, there's not a lot of emotion to that. Now, if it took on a really interesting expression, or spread its wings and uh, put a leg out to stretch it, then you say, okay, well, that might be more interesting. Or if the light is just so amazing, even though the bird has its eyes closed, it looks like it's just basking in this gorgeous light, there could be some emotion from that. So that's what I'm looking for. What is the emotional attachment that somebody might have to this image? And I don't always get all those, because some action happens, and I'm going to try to uh, make an image that represents that action in the moment. Once that action has happened, there's no going back.
Hmm.
Unless it's going to do it over and over again,
Right.
which doesn't always happen. More often than not, it was a one-time thing, and then it might fly off after that. So you get what you get. And so the part that you have to work on is, before that action happens, is understanding your subject, understanding the location, the lighting, the focus, to make sure that technically you're in the best position to make a quality image. Then you get a little bit of luck, right? And I the way I look at it is, by going to the same place day after day for a week and spending 5 hours there every day, I might get lucky. So part of it is you making your luck by putting yourself in that position.
Right.
True luck is, you walk up, something happens, you pick up your camera, you snap a shot, walk away, and you got it. That's pure luck. And that rarely happens. So you have to make your luck and put yourself in a position where, when something happens, you're ready for it. And somebody might say, "Oh, you were lucky to have it." Yeah, I spent 30 hours to get in the position where I could have that luck.
Right. So this is a great segue into my next question. So you mentioned something really beautiful, that when you are taking images, it if it has some emotional impact on you, then that kind of becomes your uh, that could become your artistic piece that you could release later. But then is th- do you just make a note of that in your memory while you are taking the pictures, and then revisit those memories when you watch all the pictures on your Mac? Or do you keep a record of that emotion somewhere while the image is taken, and then connect the two later? How do you do it?
Sure. For the most part, I'm in a position where I can make images and then later that day review them.
Hmm.
So I don't generally take specific notes on, oh, I need to look for the image that I made at 6:45
Hmm.
p.m.
Hmm.
I know that, oh, I was there for a while, and maybe about halfway through, I remember that there was some cool action going
Hmm.
on. So when I'm reviewing my images, I'm flipping through them on the computer until I get to that time frames. Yeah, I think it was around now. Where is that image? And more often than not, I can find it fairly quickly. Sometimes I'm like, I know that happened, and I know I took a picture of it, and so then I might have to dig longer to find it. But yeah, I know roughly where it is, and so that's what I look for. But then there's other times where I know that there was a lot of action going on. I don't know if I got the emotion, and I
Hmm.
might, I might
Right.
make 500 images of this thing, and I'm going through and saying, okay, that's sharp, that's technically okay, that one's good and stuff. But the bird or the fox, or the elephant seal, is just kind of looking down, and it's disconnected. You don't have eye contact, or it's not looking up at an angle to give you that perspective where it will bring the viewer into I really feel like I'm part of that scene. So I'll sometimes go through all my images and say, I don't have one. I didn't get any. I mean, I might have 1,000 sharp images and I don't do anything with them.
Hmm.
And then other times I look through and say, oh, that's what I'm looking for. And I could have all kinds of images, and I often don't even develop many of the images. I wait for them to be in a particular, find that one or two that really brings some emotional contact to you.
Hmm. So, what's the biggest challenge you face in your creation process?
So, the bigger challenges are finding the location, and understanding when's the best time to find your subject. Uh, like again with this great horned owl thing, that's just fresh in my mind because it was just in the last few days. I went there 2 days in a row and found it, and went there on the third day and it wasn't there. And I went there on the fourth day and it wasn't there. So it had moved to another area and I don't know where it is.
Hmm.
So, finding the subject is the biggest challenge. And sometimes you have to travel a lot to get to the subject, or sometimes you have to wait a lot for that subject to come to you.
Hmm.
Uh, so that's probably in general the biggest challenge. But in order to turn these around and share them with people, then it's sitting down in front of the computer and editing the image, searching for an image, first of all, that gives you that emotional connection, then spending some time to edit it, and then present it, right? So that's just a chunk of time to do. I spend probably more time sitting in front of the computer editing images than I am actually out making images.
Hmm.
And then I have, when I'm printing the images, I don't have my own printer because a lot of my prints are on metal prints and I just don't have the technology to do that. So I'm relying on the print labs and folks that I work with to be able to create
Hmm.
the image that in the way that I want it to look. And sometimes it's going back and forth, and sometimes it's hit or miss. So that's an area I need to work on, and I probably will get a printer at some point so that I can really know that I'm creating the image exactly the way I want it to be. Then if I send it to another printer, I know what it can be. And if it doesn't come back that, I can show them, hey, this is what I created. It doesn't look like that. Let's go back and work on it.
Hmm.
And the number of images. I create a lot of images. They take up a lot of storage. I've got over 40 terabytes of photos right now. And then the company that I've been using for my RAID drive, they went bankrupt,
Oh, really?
and I don't trust that it's going to be compatible with subsequent releases of the Mac operating system. So I just ordered a new RAID system that should be here tomorrow. And then I need to put that in and start migrating over to a new RAID system. And then I'm going to get another RAID system to back that up locally. Plus,
Right.
everything goes up in the cloud to be backed up there. So it's finding the subject, it's editing the time to edit it, it's getting the prints to look the way you want, and then it's making sure that you have appropriate backups so that you don't lose everything.
Hmm.
Those are
We,
those are my bigger challenges.
which technology were you using for your RAID drives?
Drobo.
Oh, okay.
Uh,
I had never heard
so
of.
it's a fantastic drive. It had so many things going for it. Very, very popular among photographers. But starting about 3 years ago, you couldn't get them anymore, and they're still around. Companies still, and I've even had good responses from them when I've sent them
Hmm.
emails with questions more recently. But they can't swear that it'll be compatible with the next OS that comes out,
Great.
and they think it'll probably work, but Apple is warning you, no, it may not work. So I can't run that risk. So I can't upgrade to the next OS until I have a better backup system that I know will be compatible.
Great. Thanks a lot, Kevin. It was great talking with you.
Great. Same here, Ashay. Thank you very much.
Thanks for tuning in. If you are a creator, I would love to talk with you. Please connect with me through my website or social media. See you in the next episode.